What's the most inappropriate thing you've witnessed at a funeral? A narcissistic family member arrived late, after everyone else was at the graveside for the burial. And probably lurking behind a tomb to pick the perfect time after the priest had just started talking. Wearing an enormous hat and sunglasses and low-cut gown like she was attending the Golden Globes red carpet or something. And loudly making an absolute scene of how devastated she was. Darlings and just generally making it all about her. The mother of the deceased putting on a terribly acted and meth-fueled show about how much she loved and missed her daughter. Shortly thereafter she was convicted of the daughter's murder. We had a snowball fight outside the parlor of my Pop's funeral. Pop would have approved. The non-family mourners seemed horrified. The funeral home putting a random guy in my grandfather's casket. Suit, glasses, and wedding band. While then admitting that they had misplaced my grandfather was fairly inappropriate for a funeral. When my dad's mom passed away, there were a lot of people there. He comes from a family of 11. 10 now as his sister passed away a while ago. So there were a lot of nieces, nephews and cousins. It was an open casket. I was around 12-13. But everyone was grabbing things from her off her from the casket. All the aunts grabbing things for their kids who don't even know her, remember who she is, way too young. The only thing my dad has a keepsake of his mother is a little rose pin that she wore in the home she was in before she passed. It's unfortunate and makes me feel very sad for my dad. At an open casket wake, a friend of the deceased attempted to give her a drink of single malt whiskey. She ended up being forcibly removed as she wouldn't stop and spilled a lot of the alcohol in the casket. It was as horrible and inappropriate as it was heartbreaking for everyone. Someone should have told her the morticians usually wire the deceased's jaws shut to keep the mouth from opening. Someone trying to quietly open a can while they were doing the closing prayer. Edit. Thank you kind people for the gold and silver. Maybe isn't as over the top as most of these comments. But I'm one of the Marines that has to go present the flag to the next of kin when a service member dies. It's usually old Vietnam and Korea vets. But sometimes it's a Desert Storm or recent war vet and the mother is there receiving the flag instead of a son or daughter. Point is, I've probably been to 45 funerals in the past year. It's striking how often someone's phone goes off during the service. It seems nearly every other or every third service someone's ringtones start playing. There's been a few times where someone will get up from their seat and answer the phone too. Not super inappropriate. But my grandfather was always a trickster. He had a great sense of humor. He had this little song he would sing to me, my siblings, and my little cousins where he would just repeat the words poo poo pee doo over and over. At his funeral, my aunt was telling stories about him and in the middle of her telling a story, my 6-year-old cousin screamed poo poo pee doo in front of 50 people. Needless to say, it lightened the mood a little bit and made everyone a little happier remembering him in a good way. Edit. For people asking. It's not the Betty Boop song. At my great-grandmother's funeral, her son showed up to the funeral wearing khakis and his bright orange Tennessee Vols shirt. Then he started yelling at my mom when she asked him who the pallbearers were going to be. Mainly throwing a fit about who was in the will. Mind you, we hadn't even left the funeral home yet and were literally needing to know who they would be at that very moment. Needless to say, we don't talk to that side of the family anymore. The lady who convinced my mother to ditch chemo and use essential oils. My brother-in-law's girlfriend locked herself in a car. Cried and screamed threatening to kill herself. At my father-in-law's funeral. She was fine 5 minutes later and explained to my in-law she did it because she's not used to not having all the attention. She thought her being pregnant would make people forget that the father died. That's disgusting. At my grandma's funeral, there was a woman that had a really bad relationship with my grandma. But one of my aunts invited her to the funeral. She started receiving people as if she was a family member and tried to put herself at the center of everything. Not a funeral, but my grandmother was on her deathbed. She was going in and out of consciousness. My arsehole father and his arsehole sister start arguing over who will get a wedding ring. Not for sentimental value but because they wanted to sell it. Anyway, to make a long story short, they took the ring off and their mother came out of consciousness and the first thing she said was, "Where is my ring?" F-king scumbags. I've mentioned it before, but at the wake for my very young sister, my aunt started talking to me about how she was going to write children's books and gave me a pen with her contact information on it. I'm not sure what she wanted, but I write and edit and I was working on an English degree and we barely ever see her, so I took it as self-promotion, not offering ways to reach out. My mom threw the pen away. At my grandfather's funeral, the stand-in, curmudgeonly pastor kept calling my grandfather by the wrong name. "Pastor, we are here to memorialize the life of John Smith." Crowd looks confused. Pastor. John Smith lived a good life. I had never personally met John Smith, but my spouse loudly, "Well, I've never met John Smith either. His name was Bob White." Everyone attending burst out laughing. My grandmother's funeral was on her birthday. I purchased happy birthday balloons because it was what she would have wanted. I was immediately reprimanded by my mother when I arrived as she forgot it was her birthday. But everyone that knew the family knew that she would have loved it. Even my grandfather laughed when I walked in with them. At my cousin's funeral, one of my relatives literally tried jumping in the casket with him. Really traumatizing experience, I might add. At a family friend's funeral, a man I allegedly met when I was 3 came up behind me, pulled my head back by placing his hand on my neck, and told me that I might not remember him now but I will someday. He was right. At my grandpa's funeral in 2006, a random drunk woman that no one in our family knew stumbled in and started singing show tunes, then crying till she was escorted out. My ex came back from her grandfather's funeral. I had to work with family reunion pictures of herself, her siblings, and her parents posing next to the open casket. When I casually commented that I thought it was a little off, she explained that they did so because grandma otherwise wouldn't believe he died. My mum and sister were smoking weed at my cousin's funeral. He was only 16 when he died, so there were lots of kids there as well. My mum also wanted to surprise everyone by sending clowns to said funeral, who were going to paint butterflies on their faces because my cousin died of epidermolysis bullosa, known as butterflies disease. What the FCK? One of my best friends died in September. There were some questionable circumstances surrounding his death, in that we were all pretty sure it was drug related, heroin. Anyways, the guy that got him into the stuff, who shot him up the night he died, showed up to the funeral. Hi. I was at my then boyfriend's friend's funeral. Her aunt sat with me at the back and told me that she spontaneously lubricates at funerals. Scooched away real quick. My best friend died last year from a random heart failure at 25. The pastor at the funeral went on for about 10 minutes about how we had all killed him because we were sinners and that we should join his church to make amends. He didn't know any of us. It was very uncomfortable. And a strange uncle driving past my grandmother's funeral playing Another One Bites the Dust. Edit. To everyone apologizing for laughing or whatever, please don't. It's no longer a sore point for me or my family. That uncle was suffering from a mental breakdown due to drug abuse and a high pressure job, and that combination eventually took its toll. It makes it easier to deal with them if he was just being a spiteful prick, as we thought at the time. And then more cars are following him playing the same song. Then another one does. And another one does. And another one drives a bus. A marriage proposal to the recently widowed. She accepted. Edit. Reddit is thirsty for drama. Sorry, but you will be disappointed. I know this is a thing in some families where if a guy dies, a single male relative of the deceased will end up marrying the widow. Why this is a thing, I don't know, but no it is. So, the divorced brother proposed to his deceased brother's wife and she said yes. I doubt there was any cheating going on there. The two are still happily married as well. I guess it's not totally inappropriate given who had died. But a group of guys lit up a fat joint at a funeral I went to in HS. I guess it was his smoking buddies, but it didn't go over that well. My step-grandmother died a few months before the Borat movie came out. So everyone was in full-blown Borat mode. Someone's phone went off and their ringtone was "Throw the Jew down the well." Edit. She, as well as most of the people attending the funeral, were all Jewish. The priest repeatedly referred to my grandmother by the wrong name. After the fourth or fifth time my aunt got up and quietly told him the correct name. My grandmother had attended church weekly for decades. There was no reason for the priest to not know his parishioner. Needless to say, we did not pay his fee. At my great-aunt's funeral in rural Missouri. Open casket. Small country church. The pastor says my great-aunt's dying wish was for one more person to embrace the teachings of Jesus Christ and to stand up right now and receive baptism in front of GAWWWD and his congregation. Everybody's head swiveled in my direction, except the corpses. Nope. I'll just stare up at the ceiling for a while, guys. Thanks. I'm so glad you clarified that the corpse did not look at you. I laugh when I feel uncomfortable. Death makes me pretty uncomfortable. I'm the kind of guy who laughs at a funeral. Can't understand what I mean? You soon will. Grandma's funeral. My own kids. Boys ages 10 and 8. At their great-grandfather's wake. They got a chair and moved it to the casket and started making his mouth into smiley face. Laughing the whole time. When me and their grandfather, my father-in-law, saw it, I immediately pulled them away and told them they shouldn't do that. Grandpa laughed and said it's fine. He would have really loved that they did that. We later found out that the great-grandfather had asked the funeral home ahead of time to put a sign in his hand that said "Thanks for coming," but they refused. I want a get well soon balloon in mine. Not sure if this counts as inappropriate, but when my high school classmate died, we were already in college. Ike. His ex, also high school classmate, came to the funeral. She cried so dramatically, because she wasn't able to end things with our dead HS classmate on a good note, that guests thought she was the current SOGF that time. Current SOGF was left alone, sitting alone staring blankly at the casket while relatives, friends, HS classmates comfort the ex. Also, it got to the point that the boyfriend, can't recall if he attended or just got word of what happened, of that girl during that time, got jealous and got angry because it looked like she cared more for the day than him. Posted a rant on social media. Edit. Fixed pronouns since I'm bad constructing. TL. Doctor during my college years. High school classmate died. His ex came to the funeral and cried dramatically, looking like she's the GF, and current GF was ignored during her sobbing. BF of the ex that time was furious. My boyfriend's ex-wife being all happy and smiley cause he didn't update his will before he died and she was still getting half. My grandmother died when I was about 10 and my older sister was 12. We were at the wake for nearly 6 hours and the makeup they had put on her was very bad. It was sad and disturbing. To lighten the mood, an uncle told my sister and I that you couldn't feel it if someone tried to lick your elbow. We went around licking elbows of grieving family members for the rest of the wake. Yes. You can feel if someone licks your elbow. I went to my uncle's funeral with my dad, sister and friends. My father was already hammered and my idiot friends dressed in t-shirts and shorts. To top it off, my cousin wore the skimpiest top to her own dad's funeral. My father, wasted, was hitting on his own sister-in-law. My cousin ended up inviting us to smoke medical marijuana in her car. It was a disaster. Was at the funeral of a priest once. He was so well liked in the church. Not only were there dozens of other priests, but something like 2 or 3 bishops. More than half of the people had to stand outside of the church and listen via loudspeaker. Kind of hard. When the neighbor of the cemetery plays anti-church and anti-God songs loud enough to hear nothing else. I'm absolutely not religious and usually listen to exactly the same music as well. But holy cow, that was inappropriate. Especially because the guy got up at around 8 a.m. on a Sunday JST so he could FCK with people. I walk up to the caskets to pay my respects at my grandma's funeral. My cousin walks up at the same time, and as we are both crying, she says it's just crazy to believe that 2 weeks ago grandma and I were smoking a joint in your kitchen together. What? I was 5. My great grandmother had died from old age. And for some reason it was a closed casket funeral. From what my mom told me, my great grandmother hadn't been into wearing makeup when she was alive. And she definitely wouldn't wear it as a corpse. One of my relatives, probably about the same age as I but more used to open casket funerals, wondered why they couldn't see the corpse. I commented in my innocence that she's bones now. That was one way to break the ice at an awkward funeral. Inappropriate, but not cruel or mean. My grandma cried with genuine tears and passion about how good of a lover my grandpa was and how much he liked to have sex. I felt sad for her, but also trying my absolute best to not burst out in laughter. My sister's elderly Phil found out he had cancer and shot himself in the head. He wasn't one bit religious, but her husband, his son, had joined the Mormon church and decided on his own that the funeral services should be held there. The Mormon minister, who had never met the deceased, proceeded to hold everyone but me and my spouse captive for well over an hour while he described in minute detail why we should all join his church and become Mormons. We got up and walked out on the sales pitch after 20 minutes. F-king asshole. A few years ago, when we were 15, a friend of mine committed suicide. She'd been sexually assaulted and raped by her mother's partner as a child. And the mother stayed with the guy, so my friend and her younger sister ended up in foster care. The funeral was f***ing horrendous, with the obvious rift between her biological family and foster family. I know where I stand on the matter, and the funeral celebrant seemed to be trying to bridge the gap for the sake of respect for my friend, but he kind of came across like he was way out of his depth and didn't really know what was happening. The whole thing was overly religious considering the sort of person my friend was, and I know she would have preferred to have her actual self celebrated, mourned for, rather than the whole thing being made about, oh but we lost our daughter. Not you, you're the bad ones. We're the family. She deserved so much better in life. And in death. I still mourn for that girl and the life she led. My grandpa's phone going off in the middle of the eulogy and his ringtone was Staying Alive by the Bee Gees. My partner's stepmom's funeral. I was standing next to my partner to support him when one of his distant relatives, before even giving condolences or a greeting or anything else, asked, "Are you two married?" "No." "Oh, but you're together?" "Yes." "What a shame." The same woman then approached us at the wake and started going on about how nice it was to see young love blossom after a family breakup and how exotic I was. "I'm Asian. He's white," because my partner had broken up with the mother of his child. She heavily implied that I was just a rebound and that he would be back to his normal self soon. And my partner corrected her and told her that we had been together for 5 years. She visibly became uncomfortable and said, "Oh, how nice." At my grandmother's funeral, she only had 3 blood relations left in the world, myself included. Her second husband's family did not allow any of us to be part of the planning. They wouldn't let us sit in the family pew and wouldn't let us give farewell words during the service. A family friend kicked other people out of a pew near the front at least. I nearly lost my shit during the eulogy when the pastor stated she enjoyed plunking on the piano. The same piano she never touched, and threatened to take an axe to on a daily basis due to all the damn dust it collected at the grave. Each of the blood relations laid a rose on the casket, and multiple people attending said, "Who are they and why are they even here?" Almost as an afterthought. We were invited to my grandmother's home after the burial, which caused many puzzled looks from attendees as to why we would be invited. I noped the hell out of that to give the woman the send-off she would have actually wanted, with alcohol and friends. I had a guy that I don't know walk up behind me and my dad during my grandma's funeral. They were lowering the casket at that moment. This jackass put his arms around both of us and I looked back. Everyone was wearing black. Obviously. Except the CNT. He was wearing American flag pajama bottoms and a red shirt with the sleeves cut off. He looks at both of us and says, "Cheer up. Guys. My dad and I are not violent. But we had to talk each other down from turning around and dual punching the bitch on the jaw." I know. Not the most inappropriate thing ever. But at that moment. It felt like it. Stupid bitch.